Do you want a financially secure future, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones as well? This is Generations of Wealth, the podcast that breaks down the most effective wealth building strategies you can easily apply to your own life. Join investor and international best-selling author Derek Dombeck in exploring practical tips and sound advice on building a profitable business, creating a powerful brand, or getting into the thriving world of real estate investing. This is your chance to create your very own financial roadmap to live your vision, love your life. Let's begin this discussion with your host, Derek Dombeck.
Welcome to the Generations of Wealth podcast. I am your host, Derek Dombeck, and as I'm doing this intro, I'll admit I do the intros after we record the shows, and I'm actually going to have a hard time doing any justice in this intro because my guest today, Andrew Abernathey, he's got an incredible journey that started very young in his life, and he's only 30 years old at this point. But where this show ends up going and discussing what he's currently doing in business, but then also in his charitable foundation is absolutely amazing. You may want to have a tissue ready. So before I bring Andrew on, I just want to really extend a thanks to everybody that's part of the Generations of Wealth family now. Everything that you do to help expand our family and spread the word about Generations of Wealth is great. You can always go to thegenerationsofwealth.com. Anything that we have going on, whether it's our conference on a cruise ship, if it's our negotiations training boot camp, or our Elite Negotiations Academy coaching program, all these things can be accessed at the Generations of Wealth. And if you know somebody that you think can utilize that, please spread the word. So I'm really just I gotta stop talking and just get you to the show because this is going to be awesome. So here we go. And now, with no further ado, Mr. Andrew Abernathey. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the Generations of Wealth show.
I appreciate it. I'm excited.
Well, pre-recording, we were talking a little bit and kind of jamming about where you're from and a little bit of your journey. And I know you've got a bunch of podcasts out there. People can search your name and find out a lot about your previous history. But give us just a real brief rundown of who you are, where you're from, and then I'd love to get into more of your current events, your current day-to-day stuff.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah, Andrew Abernathey, 30 years old, born and raised north of Minot, North Dakota. Many of you probably don't know where that is, but it's just center North Dakota, straight up. Basically Canadian, like 10 miles from the border. Grew up on a family farm. I'm one of six kids in the family. Farm started in 1901. My brother and I took it over in 2010. And so did that for quite a while. And then was actually raising money and doing real estate on the side as kind of a hobby. I started really young at like 14 and was a big Warren Buffett fan. So kind of followed that model and then kept raising and doing apartments and operating companies, kind of just did a lot of various things. And then next thing you know, by the time I was about 20, I realized I guess I probably can't just be a farmer full time. I might have to so my brother runs that. I run Abernathey Holdings, and we've now raised about $100 million in equity in holdings, and then 100 million plus of bank debt and growing for our various divisions, which we'll get into. I have an amazing wife of coming up on 9 years, which is crazy. Next year, 8 now. 3 awesome boys. 3, 5, and about to be 7. They're my world. And the business, which is kind of my 4th kid, as well as our foundation. So I'll give it back to you and we can kind of just dive in. I'm excited.
Well, I think 2 points that I want to make before we go into the more current stuff is, number one, you started very early, and because you're only 30 now?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I say only because I'm old as shit, and so are a lot of our listeners, right? But that's amazing because a lot of people in their 20s, and in your case, in your teens, raising money and doing all the things in the business can be very overwhelming and scary from a fear factor. But the other thing I want to point out and get your viewpoint on is you were born and raised in a very rural, small town type of community.
Yeah.
And many people think, I don't live in a major metropolis. How am I going to find deals? How am I going to raise money? How did you shift your mindset? Or maybe it never was an issue for you.
I would look for opportunities. I think there's opportunities no matter where you're at. It depends if you're looking or not. So, for example, farmers and small communities are very tight knit, and farms are businesses. And I knew that those farmers, if somebody flew in from New York, they're not going to give money to that person. It's a very tight knit thing. It's somewhere you can't tap. So I figured, I'm a local. Everybody knows me, my family, my generations behind me, so they know where I live. If I mess up, they know they can trust me. And so I just started knocking on doors, and it was a volume game. It was, 50 or 100K. Now, obviously, I didn't start raising money until I had some track record. I had $4,000 saved up from running grain cart, and I would have had 6 grand, but I bought a go-kart. So I had 4 grand left. And I put in the market when it crashed, just fortunate timing, turned it to 80 grand. Again, that was lucky. I had no education at that point. And that was a little track record to then go and raise some cash. And then when that was a success, then I just started knocking on doors. 50 to 100K each farmer, doing 5 stops a day, that starts to add up. And that's how I got my first roughly 5 to 10 million that way. Then I proved that. And then that's when I went out and I was able to go to the cities and larger checks. But I'm a big believer there's opportunity wherever you look. That was my opportunity, and I felt it and I knew it.
I love that. I love the door knocking aspect of it, the face to face, people to people, because I mean, that's what I do. I love negotiating. I love being across the kitchen table, but so many people want to just push the easy button. And I'll throw it out there, your generation. I mean,
Oh yeah, fair enough.
I'm a little biased. I'm in my late 40s.
Yep.
And I look at a lot of the younger generation where it's all digital. The art of talking to people is being lost.
Yeah.
And so I love your start. I love everything about it, but we don't have to dwell on that because I really want to know what you have going on now, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail there too, which again, plenty of podcasts for that. But so now fast forward, now we've got 3 distinct divisions. We have mobile home parks, we have Abernathey Development, which is self-storage ownership and development, and we have municipal equipment dealerships under 2 different brands. So Abernathey Holdings is basically a private Berkshire Hathaway, more so. I really didn't know what I was creating when I started this. So now looking back, it's a very unique thing. So syndication, most people know, is there's a property, there's a GP and an LP, and the general partner says, "Hey, I'm raising money for this property." The LP puts it on the property. The GP might get a management fee, a disposition fee, a finance fee. If they make over a 6% hard hurdle, they'll get 20% of that. Sometimes the general partner actually has their own management company, construction company. So they make money all over the place, and they might not even put anything in the project. And the LP's happy to make 15, 20% IRR, whatever it may be net of fees, probably 15% net of fees realistically. So holdings is a little different. Holdings is you actually buy shares. It's a company. It's a units because we're an LLC, Delaware. We have 120 basically almost investors, partners now. And when you buy shares in the holdings company actually owns all the real estate, or it owns all the divisions, and some of those divisions own real estate. We actually have our own construction company. We have our own equipment dealership. Anything that we do for vertical operations or property or anything, it's all inside of that. I get a salary that's approved by the board. I don't get anything else. All the shares that I own, I bought the same price as everybody else, the same class of share. And so there is no profit share. There is no general partner owning anything outside of it. And that's how our shares have compounded at over 20% a year for 14 years. Our shares were $7.93 in 2012, for example, and they're about $80 today. We've had over $10 million of shares being bought and sold amongst various new investors and current investors. And we're still private. Not sure if that'll happen forever. There's a few reasons to go public. One is access to capital. We've never had an issue. 2 is liquidity. Again, never had an issue. And then 3 is you can use your shares as currency, which that's not an issue for us. So I'd like to stay private forever. But we don't do dividends. We've never done a dividend, just like Berkshire.
Okay.
So as long as no one, as long as there's liquidity, and we're good. Because if there is no liquidity for some reason, there's more buyers or sellers than buyers, well, then a dividend and or going public would be required. But anyways, I think we dive in. So we've got, which one would you want to touch base on first? There's three divisions, I guess.
Let's start at the top. You start with mobile home parks.
All right. So mobile home parks is a newer one. Um, there's a podcast I did talking about debt cycles and how we're at the end of a short-term one and actually also at the end of a long-term. And it talks about what's inflationary, deficits. Right now, the world has $100 trillion GDP, a 4% deficit globally blended. The Green Energy Act is going to add about 15%. Not for it or against it, doesn't matter. Just going to add 15%.
Oh, by the way, we're not politically correct on this show, so
Oh, okay.
say whatever hell you want.
That sounds good. It is what it is. Going to add 15%. Then these deficits with interest rates, because interest rates will go up because, which I'll get to that, that's going to be, so let's say we get to 20% deficits on $100 trillion. There's going to be printing of money. There's only three ways for a world reserve currency like the United States to get out of debt. One is you basically go bankrupt, which they won't because they have the license to print. Two is you print money. And three, you have a balanced budget, and good luck with a third. So we're going to be printing money. And when you print money, what you're going to have is a 10-year bond. And a lot of things are based on the 10-year bond. So the 10-year bond, I think, is going to stay in the 4 to 6% range. The reason I think that is no one's going to accept buying a bond and saying, I'm going to take less than that, because they know they're going to get paid back in the future with a devalued currency because they got to print money to fill the deficits. Taxes are probably going to go up. Again, I'm not a fan of it. I'm just saying they're going to have to do something. It's just, this has happened before. This is similar in the early 1900s. We have internal and external conflicts. Anyways, what's inflationary? Deficits, lack of immigration policy. The only thing that I would say is deflationary would be the AI, deglobalization, which is also inflationary. Everything's inflationary except for AI. That's it. So anyways, going back to what I believe in for investments, I think that we're going to have a lot of inflationary pressures the next few years. I'm thinking up to 50, because there's going to have to be a devaluation to get out of this debt, inflate our way out of it, just like we did let Japan do here. With that being said, affordability is going to be a major issue. The wealth gap's getting bigger because with inflation, you have the haves and have-nots that they separate. Because the have-nots that don't own any assets that are going to inflate are just going to have higher expenses. And you're going to have the haves that have assets that will inflate, and they're going to be wealthier. So I am putting my chips on things that are affordability issues. Self-storage is an affordability issue. Homes are getting smaller. D.R. Horton just came out with an article about how their homes that they're building are just way smaller than they used to be. So we build Class A self-storage, $20 million per build. We're doing about $250 million in ground breaks a year here next year. Those are all in major metros, 100,000 population, 3-mile radius, certain incomes. And then mobile home parks, same thing. You have an increasing need due to affordability, and they aren't making any more of them. In fact, they're taking out a commission for other developments. So you have a decreasing supply, an increasing need, simple math there. And then the other thing I like is operating companies that have high return on assets deployed. So if inflation doubles, you in theory have to double your assets deployed to double your earnings in that business to have the same real return. Well, if I have two businesses, one business is 20 million in assets making $2 million. Company B has 10 million in assets making the same 2 million. I'm going to pay a hell of a lot more for company B because I know that when inflation doubles, I've only got to put 10 more million in that company to make the same earnings real time. Company A, I've got to put in $20 million just to double those same earnings. So I'm looking for high asset or high return on assets deployed operating companies like our municipal equipment division. So I'll stop there. I sometimes get on tangents, but.
Well, I think the main question is, let's go with mobile home parks to start with, right? It's been a hot commodity for quite a few years. So have existing self-storage facilities.
Yep.
Where I think where you have the advantage is you've built up to a point where you've got a large enough pool of funds available that you can kind of stiff arm the small guy, which is good.
Yep.
But the question is, does that mean that sometimes you might be overpaying for these facilities?
Good questions. Yeah, so we didn't do a whole lot there. So there's if you go back in history, 30% of the time, real estate, it's not a good time to be a builder or buyer. 30%. 70% of the time it is. So for example, that 30% was between 2019, 2020 and 2023-ish when interest rates started going up. That was a time where there was a lot of euphoria in the market. Everybody was thinking negative interest rates, and we were not building and buying there. Actually, in fact, we didn't do anything. Our cash pile to assets went up to like 60 some percent.
Okay.
We actually raised money because there's Warren Buffett did this. He issued like billions of dollars in bonds in Japan at a 0.5% interest rate. And everybody's like, why the hell are you issuing bonds? You've got, at the time, it was like maybe 100 billion in cash. He's like, the time to get capital, good capital, and the time to deploy it in good deals are never the same time, ever. So we raised money. Our cash pile in going into this interest rates going up was like 60 some percent. And now we're deploying it. So we don't buy things that create, we look at things based on IRR, based on the 10-year staying in the 4 to 6%, based on cap rates being where they're at or a little higher. We don't play in the games of, I hope if rates go negative, we'll make money. That's speculation. That's not investing. The other thing that we do is there's a simple formula is you got to build them for less. In storage, for example, you got to build them for less, fill them faster, and sell them for more. Well, how do you do that? So in the storage business, and I'll get back to mobile homes. In the storage business, we do everything dirt to door. So we own the construction company. We are our own entitlement crew. We do everything. We're able to build these things for, call it 10% less than anybody else, just because of our volume and verticals. We're able to fill them faster because of the fact that we have 3 guys, all they do is look for dirt. We get the best sites, infill sites. Our criteria is strict. We turn down most sites, and that allows us to fill these things quicker than industry standard. Industry's 3 years, we fill them in 2. How do we sell them for more? REITs will pay a 50 to 100 basis point cap rate premium if it's $100 million or more in a portfolio, because they don't want to go around with billions of dollars trying to buy one-offs. So we build enough per year to basically every year create a $250 million+ portfolio, and we get a 50 to 100 basis point premium like more than anybody else. We build them for less, we fill them quicker, and we sell them for more. That's how we make our high return. In the mobile home business, it's somewhat similar. You can't develop those. So what we do is go around. For example, we just did a $20 million acquisition. That was 3 to 5, I can't remember exactly, but call it 4 different transactions. Ma and Pa, they were selling, because those small little parks that are half empty because they can't afford to buy the trailers, they're 8 caps. So we go and buy all these 8 caps, 7 caps. We invest $5 million, fill all the lots, get them rented, put them in a portfolio, and a REIT will come in and buy them at a 6 cap today. Arbitrage. See, that's the model is. And then if things go back to the 30% of the time, which they will, we just hang out. Cash pile grows. We don't get sucked up into that. In our storage business, we just say, hey, if it gets crazy, we'll just start building storage for other people, probably make more fees than we pay ourselves.
Right.
And then we'll just start building for ourselves again when it's time. So our verticals don't stop. It's just, who are they building for? They build for us 70% of the time and 30% for somebody else when they'll pay stupid prices.
I mean, that's capitalism, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're all here for. So I guess touch on the municipal holdings or the municipal equipment division a little bit, because that's not something that's commonly talked about.
Yeah, so that one there is a sorry, one sec, my screen went smaller. So that one there kind of falls into the category of high return on assets deployed. It's a smaller division of ours. I actually bought that when I was 19 or 20. I had to have a fake ID to have a celebratory beer with the owner when we bought it. But that thing's, I probably can't say it online, but
yes, you can. Yeah.
10 years ago, so we're good. Sorry, cops. Probably, yeah.
Listen, I don't want to cut you off midstream here, but I live in Wisconsin. You're from North Dakota. Per capita, we are 2 of the drunkest states in the United States. So we don't apologize for drinking beer early in life or
what else are we gonna do this? Man, it's freaking cold as shit in Minot, I tell you what.
Absolutely. So but back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so I was 19. It was funny. I was just getting out of high school and I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm heading to Great Falls. Just bought a company. Like, okay, see you later. I've never even been to Montana, but Normand Equipment, the reason I liked it, some broker called me on it because I called all the brokers. I'm like, hey, I'm 19 looking for companies. And so they sent me this one. It started in 1947. This was a 3rd generation. The owner had no kids and he's like, hey, I'm retiring. So I drove out there and they sell to municipalities. And at the time, they were doing like $3 million in revenue, but they were making, 25, 30%
Mm,
EBIT to revenue or to assets deployed, excuse me, total assets.
okay.
So you add a little leverage on there, you're making 35, 40, 50%. So we paid a little multiple of book because, again, yes, you paid goodwill at the start, but every dollar that you put in that business going forward that they can continue to deploy at that return, there's no goodwill attached to it. You
Right.
paid goodwill once. So again, the best business in the world is a company you can buy that has high return on assets deployed, and they're able to deploy a lot of money at that going forward. That's the best business in the world. Hard to find,
Mhm.
very hard to find, but that's the best business. So we struck a deal and we bought it. And then I brought in, I actually offered the job to someone I met out there. And he said, "Hey, I'm about to retire, but I know a guy." So he brought in Luke Stewart. He's been in the business for 20 years, or probably 15 years at that point. He was like 30 some, 35. He came in, fast forward now, that was 2015. So we're almost 10 years in. He's going to hit $15 million in revenue this year. I mean, the guy's crushing. I think he's on his way to $50 million. And so, again, great company. Receivables are quick. Assets deployed are minimal to the EBIT. We're still in that 25 to 30% with some leverage. We're 30% plus return on equity. That's a good business for inflation. And with the Infrastructure Act and the bill, I have nothing but optimistic thoughts of its future.
Yeah.
So that's that company.
Okay. So a couple questions come to mind. Number one, I mean, did you go through any formal education because you started at 14 and you've obviously you're self-made, you've done a lot of studying, but many listeners are going to wonder, like did you go to college? You have a master's degree and that's how you learned all of this stuff? Or is it what I'm assuming, the School of Hard Knocks?
Yeah, it's the latter. I learned a lot. I mean, again, I'm a nerd. I'm a big believer in continuing to learn. Inflation will never take away your education. So, but with technology these days, I mean, I learned about discounted cash flow on a Harvard class on YouTube for free. I was just curious about it. So as long as you're a self-starter and obsessive, obsession wins over smarts all day long. I'm not that smart. You don't have to be that smart to do this business. You just got to be obsessed and have integrity and patience. So I actually went to college at NDSU in Fargo for ag econ. So I was going to farm.
Mhm.
And I was a year in, and my dad, at the time, I was managing about $15 million. And my dad called me and was like, "Andrew, I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't go to college. I went to college," he said, "and I had fun. I had a really good time. But you either need to give them their money back, and you can call them after you're done with college, because it's not fair to them
Mhm.
to be split, or you need to quit college and manage their money full time because that's what they deserve. And I'm not gonna tell you what to do. I don't blame you, but that's what you need to do." So I chose to drop out, and I haven't regretted it. But I have no degree, and I read a book a month. I'm an Audible learner. I
Yeah.
don't learn. I wasn't a good student. I can't read. I'm a listener, a watcher. That's how I learn. I just can't read and comprehend very well.
I'm very much the same way. Self-educated, School of Hard Knocks. Books put me to sleep, so I'd much
Yeah.
rather listen to them than read them. But the reason I really wanted to bring that point up is because it can be intimidating listening to you explain, well, we just bought this for 20 million, we raised that for 50 million, all these numbers. But the reality is doing what you do is no different than buying a house for $50,000. It's just adding a few more zeros. The process is not different. And I think so many people get hung up on that when you start talking about big numbers in the millions. Uh,
Yeah. And this is more of a part two video. I mean, again, I really recommend you look at one of my part one videos because there's a lot that went into this. I mean, we skipped over a big chunk of this, right? I mean, 90% of this business has been built in the last 3 years. It took 10% of it took over a decade. So it's not an overnight success,
Yeah, and actually we'll have a link in the show notes at thegenerationsofwealth.com/capital, and that'll take you right to Andrew's website and how you can get more information about Andrew. So again, that's going to be thegenerationsofwealth.com/capital, and everybody can go and follow Andrew and look at everything else he's got out there. So so now what's next? I guess.
That's a funny thing is as an entrepreneur, we're all, I'm sure everybody that listens has the same thing, is sometimes I get too far ahead. Like that one of my mistakes, and you'll see it in the prior podcast, was I had too many cups, too many divisions at one point back in the day, and not enough money, not enough water to fill any of them. And so I had to slim things down. So we have three divisions. We just added the one, so we only had two there for a bit. I am And the thing is, I delegate things. It's Warren Buffett. So we get leaders, we get management. I basically work myself out of a job. So I'm really itching myself to find a vision for. I've got some ideas.
Mhm.
But again, I got to be patient because I don't want, I mean, yes, I could go raise more money, but I've diluted my wife and I down to 30% already. By raising all this capital, 100 million, I've diluted to 30%. And controlling interest, I moved the goalpost. We have a supermajority clause where as long as we own 28.1%, we have effective control. Well, I don't want to lose control. I could probably raise another 15 million. So it's just now it's organic,
Yeah.
which is testing my patience, which is good because compounding, I mean, I'm 30. If I
Yeah.
just do nothing, don't touch any, dumb buttons, by the time I'm 100, if I can live that long, knock on wood, we'll be good. We should be able to hit $1 trillion company, assuming no dividends. But the patience and stuff. So what's next? We'll be adding divisions. In my just doing compounding math, we'll probably add 1 to 2 more divisions within the next 10, but over the next 10 years. And the current divisions and those two will be able to deploy at least 500 to $1 billion equity, not including debt. And then after that, in my 40s, that's when compounding starts to hit. Like Buffett, he's got $100 million a day coming into his office that he has to put somewhere.
Yeah.
And we have a very decentralized management system, a centralized capital allocation system. My job is to allocate capital and incentivize managers to send money back to me that they can't put to work efficiently. So my job really is not going to take off until I'm probably in my 40s. And then it's going to get really busy. Then I got to find divisions probably every couple of years.
Mm.
So I'm really focusing on the family, the boys. Like I said, I've got 3 little boys. I'm doing my best to be the best father and husband I can be because wealth isn't just money. There's so much more to it. 2 years ago, I didn't care about fitness or health, and I really started to do. I got my body fat percentage down to 10% now. I work out. It's good for the boys to see and good for me. And my wife and I are, you know, it's been 8 years, coming up on 9. I love her as much as the day I met her, if not more. But that takes work. Marriage isn't easy. They say the more you see somebody, the more it takes, like work wise. For example, if you haven't seen a buddy since high school, you can give them a call up and check in. It's not that much work. But when you see somebody daily, there's a lot more action needed. And love's a verb. And so, it's not just something you just do and put it on a shelf and you're good for the rest of your life. Oh, I did my deed. It's a daily thing. So between the kids and the family, fitness, trying to be patient. And I call the presidents of these divisions multiple times a week just to keep up, try to not micromanage. But that's a great question. Then the foundation, Abernathey Foundation started a couple years ago. Big supporter of human trafficking. I actually just got back from Cambodia 2 weeks ago. Was in Thailand a couple years after that. We partner with Unseen out of Fargo. Great organization. I'd recommend me putting that link in there. Anybody who wants to join the fight. It's the most, I think giving money is as hard as making it efficiently. Like you
Yeah.
can give money to a dude on the street, but what's it going to be used for? So like giving money really efficiently is just as hard as making it.
Mhm.
So that's what we've been working on. The foundation is basically just a conduit, just like Holdings. Holdings is a place for you to invest money, and then my job is to make sure it's allocated in the best way possible to build wealth. That's what Holdings is. You buy shares, and that's what you do. Foundation is a place you give money, and I do the work to make sure it's put in the right hands to do giving back efficiently. I don't get it. There's no overhead in the foundation. That is legit a conduit.
Yeah.
But I do the work. I go out to Cambodia and Thailand and meet with organizations that could use it's fuel on the fire. I'm not sending an American over to build a house for someone. I'm hiring people there that need the work and can do it for half the price. It sounds bad, but a lot of these people that do these mission trips, it's for Instagram and Facebook. I mean, you could send the same money over, build 2 houses, and hire a local guy that needs the work and impact just as much people, or twice the people, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So Lacey and I have really been focusing on that. I think the last 2 years, Lacey and I have the foundation and the givers. we have positively impacted over 55,000 lives. So
Wow.
we have it down to about $9 and some change per life impacted. The year before that, our cost per life impacted was down in the fours, but we started doing some work stateside. We dismantled 2 trafficking rings out in the Carolinas. Sadly, things cost a little more here, but we value every life, whether it costs $12 or $4. So that brought our blended up to about 9. But my goal is to get to 1 million lives impacted by 2034, and that's probably going to take about $9 to $10 million. And we just kicked this off 2 years ago. We're already almost 500,000 in. Good chunks from Lacey and I, but people go to our Abernathey Foundation link and hit donate, whether it's $10 or $50,000. We're trying to do what we can. So
That's amazing. Yeah, I had no idea about that, and it's something that doesn't get talked about much at all, and it's a growing problem. Obviously, in the bigger cities and the border cities and stuff, it's probably more talked about, but just in rural areas like Wisconsin, North Dakota, the upper Midwest, it's kept pretty quiet, but it's happening. It's happening everywhere. So
it is. And the tough part is going out to Cambodia. I went to a place in Cambodia that was like the epicenter of human trafficking about 10 years ago. A group AIM came in that we now support because we believe in their mission, again, just fueling the fire. They literally did a model where they took the brothels and they made it a school, and they started businesses in there. They basically spent $15 million in 10 years, but they revamped an area with 30-some thousand people. Now, yes, that's a pretty big cost per capita, but think about the impact. There's 800 kids in that school now. There's people being employed, and they're actually getting benefits and making good money. Think about what they're going to do and the people they touch. And then we went to a place that needs attention. It's their next spot. And I went and I had to just pretend to be every other creep walking around. And it's just sad. I mean, there was 100 15-year-olds and younger lined up in lingerie on poles in the street. They were trying to offer girls, left and right. I literally just had to fight my way through. And we went and sat in an empty spot just to kind of talk about what we just saw. And they kept bringing girls in. Well, they brought one girl in, her name Molly, and she was clearly drugged out of her mind. And so I said, hey, I just was like, I took her, but she just sat next to me. I had her eat some food, and she was out of it, and she was kind of sleeping, and her and I talked a bit, and she was from a rice farm, and she's convinced that she's going to go back in a couple days. And I just said, well, what's your dreams? And she said, I want to take over the family farm. And I said, well, you can do that. You can do anything you want. Like, you're amazing. And she started crying, and it just black eyes. And then when I was sitting there, they took her 3 different times to be raped by 3 different guys.
Wow. That is
back. And then the 3rd time I never saw her again.
That is so sad.
There's 32 million of those kids daily being raped multiple times, young as 6 months old.
Unbelievable.
I mean, they have buildings filled with 100,000 of them on the Burma Chinese border. I've seen it across the river. No windows, 100,000 souls. Wow. And then they have torture chambers. It's insane. But I don't want to, it gets pretty heavy. I mean, especially when you see it. So my job is to be a conduit to build wealth and give money. That's my mission, and that's my passion. I want to make money for good people, and I want to help give it away. One more thing, and I'll stop on my rant. But a few years ago, my goal was to not give any money until the end. I was going to give it all at the end, like Warren did. I thought I could compound my wealth quicker, and I felt like every life I saved today, I would sacrifice 12 in the future based on a decent compounding return. Somebody told me, he said, the one thing in your formula you missed is that one person you saved today, who are they going to impact?
Absolutely.
Are they going to impact? It just changed my mind. And so now Lacey and we're going to give everything at the end too. That's the goal, just to make as much as we can and give it all away. But that's the goal. We know now we are pretty big givers annually, and it's changed my life.
Well, I love all of that, because the Generations of Wealth mantra is live your vision, love your life. And it really feels like you're living your vision and affecting the world in such a positive way. I love that. Absolutely love it.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I could ask you questions for another 3 hours, no doubt about it, but I want to be respectful of your time, Andrew. I really appreciate you coming on. And again, we will have a link to your website and how people can get a hold of you at thegenerationsofwealth.com/capital. And man, I do like to ask one last question, and this
Yep.
is typical of almost all of my guests. What is something I should have asked you that I didn't? And it does not have to be about any topic that we've discussed so far.
I've said this before, and there's whether you're 30 years old or a kid or 50, and everybody's searching for like the idea or whatever it is. And I think people spend too much time looking for that thing, when in all reality, all you have to do is pick something. Like I could have picked other things outside of storage, and I could have made it just as great and successful. So find something you're passionate about and quit looking for the idea. Just grab an idea and make it the idea. You don't find the idea, you make the idea. And I know this is crazy to go from business, family to I'm about to cry to this. So it's kind of a big emotional swing here, but I just find so many people lost and just spending years and years waiting for the thing to come by. It's not going to come by. Just grab it, put your blinders up and go do something. Go make it the thing and ignore everything else. There's going to be a lot of shiny objects. There's a lot of things that can be the thing. Once you pick the thing, ignore everything else and do it. Or else my mentor told me this at a time in my life. I was good at a lot of things and I wasn't great at anything.
Mm-hmm.
That was from having too many cups, too many shiny lights, too many things. So I just wanted to say that, I guess.
No, I concur with everything you said, and it is definitely something that we embrace in our own life, but we also try and our followers to understand as well. And that's really about having a clear vision.
Yes.
And I didn't discover that until way, way, way into my career, my about 21-year career so far. And it was probably 7 years ago before I really figured out vision to the degree that I started embracing it. It took a few more years before it really got solid, but
yeah, but it blew up, right? I mean, it works. It works every time.
Well, and that's why we're doing this today, right? You're taking time out of your day. I'm taking time out of mine to give back, and we, that's part of our visions. It is for me at least. So
same. All the money in the world, it's relevant. I mean, it'll come, but again, making money for good people or giving money or helping educate, whatever I can do to help, that's what I love.
Perfect. Well, yes, this has been an emotional roller coaster for us as we're recording this, but I can't wait for the feedback from the listeners, because you've got an awesome path. It's been an honor to have you on the show, and I hope that we cross paths in person someday.
Yeah,
and we can work together on some sort of project that helps the world. So
like that.
So Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we're going to wind this up. As always, everybody that is here week after week, we appreciate you. We appreciate sharing this and spreading anything you can about the Generations of Wealth to expand our network and our family. And to those of you that are just finding us, go back, thegenerationsofwealth.com, listen to all the previous shows. They're very diversified in many different topics. And until next time, live your vision and love your life. See ya.
Thank you for joining us on another insightful episode of Generations of Wealth. May your newfound knowledge help you in leveling up your own strategies to get through the many obstacles to your money-making processes and bring you much closer to the financially secure life you truly deserve. Continue filling up your accounts and further polish your financial tactics by listening to more episodes of the podcast at thegenerationsofwealth.com. Because in your wealth building journey, there is no other way to go but up, giving you the chance to finally live your vision, love your life. That's all for now. See you on the next one.